Hey everyone, it has been such a while since I posted on YouTube. In fact, it's been over a year since my last video, which is just a bit ridiculous. I had to do this video. It's literally just a really quick one shot. There's gonna be no editing, no fanciness here, because I realized that my last video that I posted on this YouTube channel, which was over a year ago, was about quitting my job during a recession and why I was doing it and what I was thinking about and all those sorts of things. And you'll never guess what. Yeah, I quit another job during another recession again. I think I'm getting really quite good at this. I've actually learned quite a lot about quitting, so much so that I'm putting together a short book on the topic or a short kind of course on the topic soon. So watch out for more of that. If you're interested, like and subscribe and all those other YouTube metrics. Um, but here's the story of why I quit this time. I've got 5 lessons that I've learned personally throughout this video, which you might find helpful. And if you are in the same situation, it might be worth kind of dropping to the timestamps below or checking out the description below because it will have them listed there. Okay, so let's start with the story. How did I end up here again in a situation where I'm quitting and yet another job during another recession? Can we just say for a second how there have been 2 recessions in such a quick time succession? Who knows? Maybe capitalism really isn't the answer, but I don't know. Anyway, I don't want to get distracted on that. For those who don't know, hi, I'm Jess or Jessica. My pronouns are she, her, and I've been running my own consultancy or kind of freelance company for a little over a year, possibly coming up to 2 years now, a year and a bit. Um, I'm a freelance consultant. I work on a whole bunch of different projects and stuff like that. I'm mainly known for product delivery, service design type stuff. But I've also done things like organizational design, basically really hard problems that people have. I enjoy when they come to me and they're like, Jess, help. I don't know what I'm doing with this specific thing. And I can just dive in and help them, which is always really fun. I love using my brain like that. Um, and I always assumed, and I don't know where I got this from, but I always assumed that climbing higher up the corporate ladder was better. So, higher up in an organization equals better for some reason. And I can't tell you why I think that. I don't think that's the correct way of thinking at all. But for some reason, I had that in my brain. And so I had an opportunity to join a pretty high performing government department. They came to me and they said, "Hey, Jess, we really like what you're doing. We think you're a really good fit." Truth be told, I wasn't looking for anything new. I was already in a really interesting contract with a great team, but they came to me with this offer for a role of what's called a service owner. And that's a role that's really, really quite high up within government. Basically, you go from having a team of maybe one or two teams depending on the client's budget. So the team might be anywhere from like 2 people to 10 people to 15 people big, to have it becoming a service owner where you're kind of running multiple teams. So you have lots and lots of different people working for you and with you. Um, and I was really excited about this. This made me feel really good. And so I applied for the role and not expecting to hear anything. And I was actually really quite surprised when they wanted to interview me. So I thought, yeah, sure, I'll turn up and see what happens. Um, and so I turned up to an interview. They asked me some really hard questions. I asked them some really hard questions in return about kind of what the role was up to and what we'd be doing. And I heard all of the right answers. And so that drove me to accept the role of a service owner when they offered it to me. And so for about a month, I was leading what they call the security and intelligence service area within government. And this is pretty broad, but it basically covers all of the counterterrorism and intelligence gathering services within government. Um, and that felt amazing. There was several kind of teams of people within that service area, all working towards this common goal of keeping people safe from things like terrorism, and that felt really good. It felt like a mission that I could align myself to, and I thought this was going to be great. Yeah, as I mentioned before, kind of going from a role as a freelance consultant or kind of a product person before, it was a really big step up in the organization. It was seen as a prestigious role, um, and yeah, went from managing a team of like couple of people, maybe two teams of a couple of people each if the client's budget was pretty stretched, to having responsibility for this whole area, and the whole area being really quite important. Tracking and tackling terrorism, which is pretty interesting. Um, this service area contained lots of what we call in the industry legacy pieces of technology. So these are ones that pieces of technology and apps and services that have been around for far too many years and need to be changed. And before I joined, people had put together plans about how they were going to migrate away from that legacy technology, and also build a handful of brand new services too and brand new digital products too, which is really quite exciting. Um, Prior to me joining as well, a bunch of really big contracts have been awarded to what the government call managed service providers, which are external groups of people, so external companies typically. And unfortunately, these companies are typically bigger organizations. There's nothing wrong with bigger organizations. Just you go from the size of government, which is huge, to the size of a big company, which is still pretty big. And you get people who want to just do what the role says rather than what the right thing to do is. But we'll get into that in another video. Um, there was also a major hiring frenzy that was underway, because within my service area at the time, so this was a couple of weeks ago, there were several roles open. I think there were like more than 10 to 15 roles open. So we're trying to hire loads of people. But at the end of day three of this new role, this is a couple of weeks ago, there were three red flags. Firstly, the onboarding experience was pretty much non-existent. Stakeholders were, so people in the organization is what people call stakeholders typically. They were pretty unaware of my existence, which made it really a rough experience, having to go and talk to them and say, "Hey, I'm Jess, and I'm here to help you fight terrorism." But when you say those things, you're saying them to people who spend their whole lives being quite secretive about what they're doing, and quite rightly so. And you come across someone like me, like really happy, go lucky type person, and they think, "Oh, I don't know whether I trust you." And that's a really hard place to try and build a relationship from, especially if they didn't know that you were coming. And I appreciate that, um, not having the best kind of out of the gate experience or being set up for success doesn't isn't as expected in a more senior role. So typically, the higher you are in an organization, the more responsibility you have, which is seen as a good thing. But also, the level of support you have is also reduced. So it's kind of like a catch-22 situation. But it doesn't really help people being set up for success, especially if they haven't been a full-time government person before, or in big company land before. So that was red flag number one, was about the onboarding. Red flag number two, again, this is the end at the end of day three. The red flag number two, there was a large discrepancy between the expected role of a service owner and actually the reality of what people needed to do. The scope between, the difference between those two things was completely out of whack. So what people were expecting of me in a more senior role, to me, so even higher up inside of government, what they thought I should be doing, and actually what the role needed to do for the next, 6, 9, 12 months was completely different. And that was a bit of a challenge. So basically, you had people who were senior to me, like super senior within government, and what they needed. I had what my teams needed. Again, I had like multiple teams who were reporting into me, who were all going, "Oh, we need this, we need that, whatever." And obviously, they needed a lot of support as well. It's what my users needed, which is the people who actually use the tools that the teams are creating, and then also what I needed and what I thought the role was. All of these things were completely different from each other, which made trying to do something productive really quite challenging and pretty much not possible. And again, realize that at the end of day three. And the third thing, just to wrap off the three things I found at the end of day three, was just around bureaucracy. Now, don't get me wrong, checks and balances should absolutely exist. They are pretty much vital for government, especially at the level of government. You don't want to just randomly create something or just go do something. as much as the kind of digital people might want to go and do that, and I certainly do want to go and do that, there does need to be some level of checks and balances. Um, and I got this technique that I picked up from a friend who I worked with at Google, and she used to say the phrase "for why." So if you'd never really understood what was happening, she would go "for why," and it was a really, really good way of basically disarming the situation and saying, "Yeah, I actually don't know why you want this," but without it sounding rude and horrible. It was more of like a good-natured joke. It was like, "For why?" And so I remember this and I was like, I'm going to put this to practice. And it worked wonders because I was asking these people who were asking for all sorts of random and ridiculous things. Again, more like bureaucracy related tasks. So, a report for a board meeting, a report for a pre-board meeting that goes to a board meeting that goes to an approval council, and you're like, what is any of this? And so I'd ask them for why, and I'd get the reply time and time again, which was something like, I don't know, we just need to do it. And I didn't like that answer. I don't think that's a good way of spending your time. um, Helping feed a machine that doesn't understand what or why it was needing things was something I didn't want to do. It's something I urge everyone not to do. If people can't give you a good answer about as to why you need to do something, why are you spending your time doing it? You're never going to get that time back. So there were those three kind of red flags there, but alongside these, there was also a bit of a bigger problem brewing as well. Again, this is at the end of day 3. I was starting to think these things and be able to get these red flags out of my brain. Um, and it was about what I do. So I get out of bed in the morning to build interesting things with interesting teams. That's the North Star goal. That is what I want to do. And I appreciate that there's a balance between working towards that North Star goal, and the reality of just the kind of everything else that needs to happen at the same time. So let me give you an example in terms of building new technology, for example. I said for example twice, sorry. Um, the North Star goal for me is building interesting things with those interesting teams. So the interesting thing in that example might be a new service to allow people, citizens, to be able to check their bin collection date or something. I don't know, something nerdy and exciting like that. But then there's always the everything else bucket, which is the meetings, the approvals, the board sessions, the this, that, and the other that just need to happen. Because if they don't, your thing that you're working on with your interesting thing with your interesting team can't go live. And this is the same within large kind of company institutions as well. They'll have a similar setup for this, where a new interesting thing can't go live with perhaps the legal team signing off on it or the marketing team signing off on it. And it was interesting to me because I spent 95% of my time in the time I was there in the role of a service owner doing stuff, doing work that fitted into that everything else category, and only 5% or so of my time fitting into the North Star that I have, which is building interesting things with interesting teams. And that was just completely out of whack for me, which was really unfortunate, and I hadn't anticipated that to be the case. I realized that life is a bit too short to not be pursuing your goal, the thing that you want to do, um, and ultimately, the role that I was in government for 4 weeks, um, it is an interesting role. It is a role that's keeping us, like citizens of the UK, people, humans, safer. Fighting and tracking terrorism and stuff like that. But it wasn't the right role for me because, again, those things, that skew and that balance between working on my towards my North Star, which is building interesting things with interesting teams, and then the everything else category was just a bit out of whack. So now the 5 kind of interesting things that might help folks. I've got a whole blog post about that. I'll link it in the description below. Check it out. That's what formed the basis of this video. I basically published this, and trying to publish blog content more regularly. It's free. Go check it out. And after I published this one, I had probably more than sort of 30 or so people get in contact directly, either in like Twitter DMs or over Instagram or email, and say that this blog really resonated with them, which is why I'm putting this together. Um, anyway, so if you're struggling to decide if you want to quit your job or not, here are 5 useful ways to think about it. Number one, are you utilizing your full potential in your current role? So, are you making sure that the work that you're doing is actually pushing you in the way that it should be pushing you? Now, we're all going to have days where we think, I don't really want to do as much today. And that's okay. That's fine. That's actually just normal life, right? However, you need to be able to say, right, I'm going to push myself and try to get a little bit more potential out of myself. And if you're not having that on a fairly frequent basis, if you're not feeling like you're growing and pushing yourself, then perhaps it's not the right place for you. Thing number two, to decide if you want to quit your job or not, are you feeling fulfilled in your job? So are you learning? Are there things that so fulfillment can be two things broadly. Firstly is the more emotional fulfillment. So are the people that you're working with really nice and lovely, and you get a lot of value from working with those individuals? For example, I've worked with teams before, both as a freelancer and a full-time permanent employee, where it's been absolutely fantastic. The people is what have made that program of work or that project. I'm still remembering. I sat here smiling doing this one-shot video about all of the fun teams that I've worked with in the past and people and just the relationships I've built from that. But then there's the other side to it, which is the kind of knowledge side, and the non-emotional side and kind of human connection side, which is about more learning. So if you're not having to learn new things all the time, be that technical things, be that more kind of data things, or even just people like interpersonal skill things, then perhaps it's not the right role for you. The third thing, if you're struggling to decide if you want to quit your job or not, is are you able to make a positive impact with the work that you do? So that I've got friends and people that I know and people that I coach who are working in roles that are not necessarily making a positive impact. The cliche example being, working for like an arms manufacturer or something. It's somewhat difficult to argue that you're making a positive impact with the work that you're doing, especially if you have certain views about the world. Um, and so, if you're not making a positive impact, perhaps there are other places that you can be making that positive impact into the world. The fourth thing is about are you appreciated for your hard work? So you can work yourself to a bone for an organization, for a team, for a manager, for whatever level, right? It could be a one-on-one level in terms of your manager, it could be your team, it could be your company, it could be your government, depending on how big that you're thinking about your work. But are you appreciated for the hard work that you put in? Because if you are putting in hard work and you're not appreciated for it, and appreciation can come in a whole different kind of myriad of different ways. It could be pay, it could be benefits, it could be literally just saying thank you. It could be people acknowledging that you exist. If that isn't happening, there are plenty of places that will give you that appreciation and will give you that little boost. And perhaps it's worth going and checking those places out. And the fifth and final one is mentioned it slightly before, but about pay. Are you being paid fairly for the work that you're doing? People in organizations, I often talk to kind of either current or potential coaching clients, and they say things like, "Oh, I've been in my role for 10 years." I'm like, okay, great. When we chat about the role and how much fun they're having and how engaging it is, and then they get onto the topic of pay, and it's always something along the lines of, oh, the company or the organization has hired a bunch of new people in, and they're paying them more money than me, and I've been here 10 years, and I'm more senior to them, but the pay banding has gone up, but not for me. And I think, great, perhaps you should broach that conversation, because you should be paid fairly for the work that you're doing. Go out there and check what market rates are for you now, and try and figure that out. I appreciate that people might not want to have this conversation, especially at the moment with the looming recession and cost of living crisis and things like that. But what I would say is that if you're somebody who is already listening to this video, you're probably someone who is pushing really hard anyway, and is, you know, doing things like keeping up to date with their skill sets and being fulfilled in their role and making sure that they're making the most of what they're doing. What I would say to people like you is that there's never ever been a shortage of work for good talent in the history of us doing work in the way that we do it, like in this capitalist structure. There has never been a shortage of work for good talent. So don't be scared to bring up the pay conversation. The worst thing a manager or an organization can say when you ask, can you please be paid fairly, is no. And that might be an okay thing for people to say. There might be reasonings as to why that's fair and understandable, or there might be reasons why that's not. And you can make a fair judgment from then. Anyway, I need to go and take a glass of water. It's been way too many minutes than I thought it was going to be. I hope these have been helpful. I find the subject of quitting honestly fascinating. So much so that I'm, as I mentioned at the start, I'm writing a handbook or kind of a mini book about this subject. I'll throw it up on Amazon or something like that. I don't know. It'll be fun. It will cover the why and how you should quit with frameworks and exercises to help you figure out if quitting is the right next step for you, and also case studies and things like that to give a fresh perspective on the art of quitting to help you along your journey. This isn't something you can get your hands on yet. I'm literally building this right now. If you are interested in that at all, I post regularly about this on my blog, which is justbuildstech.com, which is linked down below. It's free for now, free insight into what I'm working on at the moment, how I'm thinking through hard problems, taking on new clients, things like that. And if you've made it this far in the video, you will probably find that quite interesting. Anyway, that's it for me. Have a lovely rest of your day. Good luck out there. Bye bye.